Hello and welcome. They're close to being rescued, but have the trapped miners in Chile become a propaganda tool in a media circus? The trapped miners, who've been dubbed the 33, have been driving non-stop news coverage and gripped the attention of viewers around the world. However, critics, including some family members of the miners, say Chile's recently elected president, Sebastián Piñera, and his government have been using the media attention to boost their own popularity. Well, since rescue operations for the miners began, growing approval of the government has been reported, despite complaints that the authorities have failed to properly rebuild after the devastating earthquake that hit the country in February. On today's show, we ask, has the media become carried away by the drama surrounding the miners' tragedy and failed to cover the real issues surrounding the story? Well, you can join our conversation by calling into the show or by sending an SMS or an email. Well, we'll take a close look at how the media behaves with this sort of story in general a bit later in the show. But first, I'm joined by Al Jazeera's Latin America editor, Lucia Newman, who's joining us from Copiapó in Chile. Lucia, of course, it seems to be a lot of progress and the prospect of the miners coming up. Now, what is the scene there right now? What's the prospect of some early rescue?
Well, Riz, really hot off the press, just a short while ago, Chile's mining minister announced that there is now a time and an hour for the actual rescue to take place, which is actually sooner than expected. It will happen at midnight Tuesday, local time. That's 03 GMT of Wednesday. It will be pitch dark here. That's when the first miners will begin to be lifted up to the surface where we are now. And that has certainly, though that news has certainly caused a lot of commotion here at Camp Hope, as the impromptu camp has been nicknamed, right outside of the mine where I am right now. So a lot of excitement now. We finally know when it's going to happen. Everyone's fingers are crossed that it will go, it will take place smoothly, and that the 33 miners will again be pulled out from the belly of the earth and be reunited with their family members after nearly 70 days.
Well, Lucia, how has the story affected the image of Chile's president, Sebastián Piñera? There have been mixed reports about how it may have boosted his popularity, and of course he's been accused of capitalizing on this story as well. What's the word out there?
Well, Riz, I think we have to agree that it's the nature of the beast. Politicians in Chile and probably everywhere in the world are known for making the best out of a good opportunity to raise their ratings and their image. And Sebastián Piñera is no exception. In fact, he is very media savvy. He used to own a television station. And he has really taken the bull by the horns of this story from the get-go. In all fairness, he has, been very hands-on. It's the sort of person that he is. He's been down here at the mine several times and is expected to be here within the next 24 hours or so, because he wants to be present when the actual rescue takes place. But there has been criticism, you're right. For example, when it was discovered that the miners were actually alive 17 days after they'd been in there, the government took many hours to actually make the news known, public, even to the family members that are here, because they wanted to make sure that the president himself would be here in person and he could read the note that had been attached to the pipe that had been put down into the mine that said, "We are alive, all 33 of us, inside the workshop in the mine." So there was a lot of criticism about that, but all in all, his popularity has been boosted by what started off as a disaster and is turning into a big media show, actually.
Well, Lucia, as you know, we take viewer questions on this show. I'm going to put one to you, if I may, from a viewer in Italy who wrote in. Luciana Di Floriano wrote in saying, "The Chilean government has exploited the situation. The focus on this tragedy is obscuring other important issues, such as the Mapuche hunger strike in the Chilean prisons." And I wonder, to what degree is there a sense there, as you cover this story, that the media is so focused on this that other issues are being missed? The hunger strike, as mentioned there, the issue of rebuilding the country after the earthquake and how that hasn't really met expectations. How much of the other stories being overshadowed by what's going on there where you are?
That's a very good question. About the Mapuches, they have actually ended their hunger strike because the president, although the attention of the media has been on the miners, he was paying some attention, and he actually negotiated a change to the anti-terrorism law in Chile with the striking Mapuches, who are prisoners, by the way. They're political prisoners. So that is good news, and that has been covered, but certainly not getting the attention that it really deserved. And certainly the criticism that had been labeled against the government for not being fast enough or not being able to bring about a recuperation or recovery after the earthquake, that very much took a back seat thanks to this mining incident. So there has been criticism that many people who were left homeless after the earthquake were simply forgotten, while all the attention of the Chilean media, of the Chilean government, and of the world, frankly, was focused here.
Now, I understand there's also been very little focus on the new mining tax imposed by the government there, and I wonder what the significance of that is.
That's a good question. That mining tax is supposed to be discussed in about 24 hours. It will be passed in the Chilean Senate, we understand. There is an agreement with the opposition, and it's actually good news on the one hand, because Chile has some of the lowest taxes on foreign companies that exploit mines of any country in the world. It was only 4 to 5% tax, and there was a great deal of criticism about that. Sebastián Piñera wanted to raise that tax in order to finance the recovery effort after the earthquake. But what they're saying here is that it's fine to raise it to 14 or 15%, but that some of that money should be used to guarantee the safety of miners, considering that it's being paid for with the minerals that come out of the earth from places like this, where many miners are working in abysmal conditions.
Now, of course, we have another email here I might put to you from the USA, if I could, Lucia. It's from Richard Weher, who wrote in saying, "The press has sidestepped the legitimate questions that address the conditions of the mine, whether safety was a top priority and the impact of the mine operation after its collapse." Now, I wonder, even if the press has missed it, I gather that Chile's mining ministry is going to launch an investigation to ascertain responsibility. I guess, you know, when is there any expected result of fingers being pointed? And once the blame is ascertained, I wonder what will be done about it.
Well, there was fingers pointed from the get-go, to be fair, and that is why the head of the Office for Mining that is supposed to oversee that regulations, that mining safety regulations are implemented and followed to the T, he was fired before even the miners had been rescued, or rather before it was known that they were alive. But a lot more needs to be done, and that is true. There has been some focus. Everybody knows that this particular mine, the San Jose mine, was not meeting even the minimum standards of safety, that it had been shut down, that there had been accidents there. But this is not the only place here in the north of Chile where there are, this is not the only mine, rather, where the safety standards are not being met. And so there's going to be not only a full investigation, but a new law proposed in the Congress and in the Senate very, very soon. We understand that almost as soon as the miners are brought to the surface, because this has at least brought attention, and perhaps it is the silver lining of all this, Riz, to the situation of miners, not in Chile's large mines that have state-of-the-art technology and where safety is sacred, but in the medium and small-sized mines, and there are hundreds, if not thousands of them, all over Chile.
Now, Lucia, before we let you go, just continuing the update from what's going on there. Glad you're able to give us that time of Tuesday midnight local time for the miners to start coming up. I gather they're already planning the order in which they will come out of the ground, but I wonder if much has been said about what happens to them as soon as they surface.
Not too much detail, to be honest. We don't really know. At least for the first 6 months, we understand the government will be paying for them not to work, to sort of get back on their feet, to recover, to you know, spend time with their families, get over the trauma. They're going to be having psychological help if they need it, we understand. But what kind of work will they have? That's not clear. Will they want to return to mining? That's not clear either. So many of them will be getting a lot of contracts, very juicy contracts from media organizations that want to do documentaries. But after all the glitter and all the fuss is over, will they end up living the way they were before all this happened, forced to work in mines with horrible conditions? That is really the big question.
Well, Lucia, thank you very much for that update. Of course, we'll stay in touch with you to find out what happens as that story develops. Lucia Newman joining us there from Copapillo in Chile. We have to take a short break now, and after that, independent journalist Danny Schechter speaks to us on how the media has been covering the miner story and how the media looks at these stories in general. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. The rescue of the trapped Chilean miners is reaching a climax with the prospect of them surfacing on Tuesday at midnight local time. But critics are blaming the media for making the story a circus. We're discussing what drives that kind of coverage. I'm now joined by Danny Schechter, an award-winning independent journalist and media analyst. Danny, good to have you on the show.
Pleasure, Riz.
I know you've been following the story.
I was waiting for you to call.
Yeah, long overdue. I apologize for that, but we got you on now finally. Now, I know you've been following the story, and I wonder, what do you think has driven this particular story to worldwide prominence? I mean, miners are trapped on a regular basis, many mining deaths, of course, on a regular basis. What made this one so special?
Well, this is a genre, you know, the rescue, let's call it. It's a news genre that's had a long history. I remember years ago, a little girl falls in a well. All television news seemed to have been suspended to tell their story, to tell their family's story, to follow every detail of it during the rescue, because nobody knows what will happen. There's a drama here. There's a story of life and death here. And of course, that grips viewers, and it attracts viewers. And networks love these kinds of stories for that very reason. The problem here, of course, is that beyond the immediate rescue, and this was particularly dramatic because these men had managed to survive, they had been given up for dead, and suddenly they emerged almost, you know, back to life in a very, you know, dramatic way. And of course, that captured the attention of the world. The 33 men, and finally we got some pictures of them and all the rest of it. So every day there was sort of a new development, a new story, a family connection, tears, and you know, and just a general human drama here, which is dramatic. But behind all of this and beyond all of this, we had 29 miners killed in April at the Big Branch mine in West Virginia. You may recall there was an attempted rescue there. It was a failure. And again, it was a mine that was run by a company that didn't pay much attention to safety. Today, I spoke to a representative of the United Mine Workers in West Virginia to get their take on it. He pointed out, one, that this is an illegal mine. He called it a pirate mine with no enforcement, no regulation whatsoever, that was allowed to develop, as apparently many others have in Chile. Secondly, that when they shut the mine down, 300 people have lost their jobs during this whole crisis, as the focus remains on the 33, but not the 300 who worked there. And the president of Chile, of course, is a conservative, where the miners have always been militants and, you know, supporters of change in Chile. And he suddenly now can appear as their champion.
So what you're saying, Danny, is that to some degree this media circus has failed the public in that it's missed some of the other issues. It's missed the story surrounding the mine that might be equally important.
Well, absolutely. I mean, the New York Times just did an editorial about a mine safety bill that had bipartisan support, supposedly, until Republican staffers, not even members, began to object to it, and it hasn't been able to get through the Senate. And this is a bill in the aftermath of the death of 29 Americans in that mine in West Virginia, and a clearly illegal operation there, you know, in defiance of laws and safety standards and the like. And yet they can't even seem to get that through Congress. So this is a story that we're sort of all trapped in. It's not just the miners who are trapped.
It's interesting, actually, because, you know, there's mixed messages coming out about whether or not President President Piñera has benefited from this or not. He's certainly been part of the media circus, as we're calling it, I guess. But I wonder to what degree that's just standard fare. The politicians seem to come in when the story's there and the camera's there.
Well, I think if they knew that they would be bringing bodies out, I don't think he would be there quite, you know, in the same way as he will to join the celebration. The wives, the families are very excited. The New York Times reports, you know, that they're shopping for lingerie to meet their husbands. You know, they're waiting for the big party. And of course, he will be the champion here in terms of Chilean politics. He's the person, you know, who is the top dog, and he's supporting, you know, the men, the families, and everything else. But we can lose the real danger here, which is the mine safety issue. From South Africa to China to America to Chile, it's a global problem, and unfortunately this could happen again if the media doesn't focus some more on the safety issues.
Let me put a couple of email questions to you, Danny, because we had quite a few on this issue on the nature of the story, and I'll read two of them back to back. The first is from a viewer in Pakistan. It's from Fatima Shah, who wrote in saying, "It is rare that the media covers a positive, heartwarming story that stirs hope in people. A tragedy was turned into something positive, and the Chilean government has won over a world audience." The second one is from a viewer by the name of Marco Milonga, who wrote in saying, "The pending rescue of the miners is giving a much-needed lift to the spirit of the Chilean people after having faced one of the most catastrophic earthquakes in its history." Now, isn't that a valid point that, of course, here it's one of those rare cases where we have a positive story for the media, in the media for a change?
Look, we all want some good news for a change. I mean, given the economic conditions, given the wars that are underway, people are desperate for some, senses of a human triumph, of a story of, of people surviving a disaster. Of course, this is good news, and of course, it is seen as good news, but behind the good news is bad news lurking, and we can't forget it. That's my only point. I agree with both of the emails. Sure, we want these people to live, we want them to survive, and we want to share in their joy.
Let me ask you, on this issue of the president, for example, being there and politicians being there when the big story is breaking, do you see a threshold, a point where there's a danger of overexposure for people associating themselves with an ongoing story like this?
Well, there have been many instances when everybody expected a happy ending and we didn't get one. And I think politicians, are aware of that this thing could turn in a different direction if something that we don't expect happens. And that's the danger, of course. A politician can skillfully manipulate and maneuver himself into a position of visibility. The president of Chile seems to be doing that. But again, who's responsible? Who's going to be held accountable for these disasters? Yes, they fired, somebody in charge of mine safety there in the same way that we fired the agency in charge of BP, and Gulf, oil rig safety, but we still had a total disaster. And it's not enough to just get rid of one guy. We need a change in the way these issues, the way regulations are implemented and enforced.
Of course, there's stories of the miners once they come out being part of a celebrity circuit, being out there doing inspirational talks. No doubt there'll be a movie script already on the way. I know documentaries are already being planned. So I wonder to what degree this is something that's happened outside America, because that was America's media. The fame America had was its media handling stories like this. Is this something that sort of, I don't know if we'd say, infected the rest of the world?
I think it's captured everybody's attention and enthusiasm, a desire, for something good to report. And the men themselves, you have to give them, a lot of credit, not only for their strength and their surviving here, but their sense of community, their respect for each other, the way they've carried on with dignity and the like. I mean, that is a important story, and often working people are known for this, but not really. That's very rarely in the news. The dignity of work and the way in which workers put up with, really difficult conditions. So, let's say hats off to these men. Let's keep the focus where it belongs.
There's an email that came in from Nigeria, if I can put this to you, Danny, from Ahmed Gimba, who wrote in saying, "The media at best is reporting on every detail of the story's development rather than looking beneath it. Meanwhile, the Chilean government seizing the opportunity." Now, on that issue of all the issues around it, do we really need to know all these microscopic details, such as the shape of the pies they're baking and putting into capsules and going down? I mean,
well,
go ahead.
That's par for the course. I don't think we could have it without the color, reporting that goes on, particularly because there's a lot of spontaneity happening here. There's a lot of human excitement and hopefully the thrill of victory. And so you don't want to ignore that. On the other hand, in the same way that this is a mine and the real stuff is happening down below, the same thing is true of news. The real stuff is happening down below, and we need to get at that real stuff, and we need to expose it, we need to examine it, we need to inform people about it, and that's part of the problem, like with the whole financial crisis. You know, it was happening down below. Nobody was paying attention to it until it exploded in all of our faces. And that's where news can play an important role to balance these two elements, the human element and the investigation and analytical dimension.
So it sounds like we're not getting the real TV, we're just getting reality TV with some of these stories.
Oh, you know, absolutely. You know, and you know, the more you can do what are called character-based stories, the more you become like Hollywood. The more you become, you know, making a movie. You know, not necessarily depicting real lives and real challenges and issues. I mean, this is about an industry, the mining industry. It's not just about, you know, a couple of men who happen to be trapped in an unfortunate situation on a highway somewhere. This is, you know, an industry known for violations of safety, known for abuses of workers. And unless we take that away as part of the takeaway here, you know, we're just going to have another one of these stories pretty soon. And the second time it happens, it'll get a lot less attention, I assure you. Do
you think anything's really going to change from this, Danny? Do you think even all this attention will change the way mines work in Chile, for example?
Well, I hope so. You know, I mean, that's all you can say. Hopefully the public will pressure their politicians to do something. They've elected this conservative president, TV, you know, executive, a very, you know, a guy who's adept at manipulating images. They've seemed to, you know, backed away from the more progressive politicians in Chile. But solutions are usually not going to come from people who are basically apologists for or defenders of business practices. And that's where accountability and transparency is very important. And you know, we see it in our own country with this mine disaster in West Virginia, the people who died there, the 29 dead, and now Congress can't even agree all these months later on a mine safety bill, which everybody agreed on initially.
Well, Danny, 30 seconds. How long can stories like this be dragged out? What's the life expectancy?
Well, I think the big, you know, story is going to come tomorrow night, and when the men come out of the mine, there will be dramatic pictures of not only the rescue, which we hope goes well, but also the celebration afterwards. And you know, again, I just would caution you, something could happen that's negative. But let's hope it doesn't. Right. Let's hope these men survive. They deserve to live after what they've been through.
Danny Schechter, pleasure to have you on. The call will come much sooner next time. Thanks.
Thank you.
And thank you for being with us. Remember, you can follow the show on Facebook and see what we're up to there. You can give us your feedback on the topics and post your questions and comments. On the next show, Middle East impasse. As peace talks between the Israelis and Palestinians remain in limbo, we examine if the two-state solution is effectively dead and whether or not a one-state alternative could actually work. Be sure to tune in for that from me and the team. We'll see you next time.